I'm applying for a grant. Good morning, Evan. Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Good show you just had. I love that piece about Bonnie guessing the names.
I try to be entertaining, but sometimes I don't succeed. But most of the time I do.
Well, she got off with one bad start when she talked about mashed potato airlines.
Yeah, that wasn't good.
But after that,
and I gave her all the hints possible. I said
did.
it's something you eat at Thanksgiving, and what more could I ask?
I know, Rutabaga Airline.
That's
right.
all right. That's all right. Anyway, take it away.
Thank you. Well, here we are on the forum. And somebody asked me again, why did you call the show the Forum? And when I was trying to come up with a name, I come with names and acronyms and stuff because everybody else does. I had, when I worked with children who were disfluent stuttering, I came up with a program to reduce stuttering, PRS, which are my initials. You know, people do that. They come up with these things. But we have to understand what acronyms mean. A lot of people throw terms out. We don't understand them, but we kind of accept them anyway. Anyway, the forum, when I looked it up, meant a gathering place of information. And I thought, what a perfect place, what a perfect name for a radio program, because you bring people in and we gather information. There's so much out there. There's so many things. I went to a meeting yesterday, actually, that was sponsored by the St. Lucie County, and it's a fact-finding group right now for the elderly. there were a number of us in the room, and we had a woman who's going around getting information of various things about the communities. And we had to answer some questions like, what was the best thing you've ever done? What was your main focus? And it was really gut wrenching because you had to really think a lot and come up with some great ideas. But the ideas started flowing in that room, and it was wonderful to hear the perspective of other people from different walks of life and different professions. And we all seemed to be on the same page. It was amazing. Anyway, one of the things I'm going to be doing is called morphing. Once you do something, you morph into something else. Now, my wife does crafts, and she's listening intently to this program because we have a quiz when I get home, and I'm going to ask her, "What did you learn? What did you listen to?" etc. And I'm only joking. Um, and she has something called a Cricut, a CRICUT. And this Cricut is a machine that interacts with your computer. And you can design greeting cards, all kinds of things. And there's a cutter in there. And basically, there's a sticky piece of paper that you put on the Cricut. Then you put a regular sheet of paper on there, and you design something from the computer and give an order from the computer to cut it with a Cricut. And a knife little thing comes out and cuts it. Like if you're doing a window with all these little tiny spaces, little cuts and everything, you would spend hours and hours with an X-Acto knife. Well, you push the button and it cuts these things out. Then when you lift the page, it comes out perfectly, and all the little cutters stay on the little sticky paper. Well, she was starting to do regular greeting cards. Well, then they were multi-layer cards. Then there were this kind of card. And then my favorite one is when you open the card, a butterfly flies out of the card. Then she was making little villages and little boxes and stuff, all from the Cricut. So she was morphing into different designs. So I'm going to be morphing occasionally with our program. And we're going to do a whole series on the caregiver and how to train the caregiver at home. Now, I haven't come up with an acronym yet, but I will do that. And what I mean about training, what I mean is that there might be a seminar somewhere. The doctor's going to talk about new medications for dementia, okay, or Alzheimer's or Parkinson or something. So you bring your loved one who has dementia with you or Alzheimer's with you, excuse me, and you listen to this program. Then you come home and you put your lovely wife in front of the television set for the next 12 hours again, kind of put her on the shelf. And you don't do anything with her. And you're still frustrated and you're trapped. And the longer you are a caregiver, and I've said this so many times, the longer you're a caregiver, the more you drift away from that person you're taking care of. The less likely you are to interact with them, or what I called engaging. You don't engage much anymore, and you engage less and less, and you're frustrated because you're stuck with this burden and she can't respond. And we saved for 50 years to go and travel and everything, and I can't do that anymore because she's not capable of doing it. And I'm frustrated. And all of these negative things that come up. If we could design some things to do at home with her or him, we increase the likelihood of engaging. We increase the diminishing of this negative feeling and the negative behavior that we have. And we get some joy out of this because maybe we can tap into something, a thought, an explanation, a response that we maybe didn't think about before. Like, for instance, let me give you an example. One of the things we do is called reminiscing, and it's thinking in the past. And we're only going to do that 10 minutes in an hour. And we're going to sit down, maybe in the kitchen or somewhere, turn off the TV, and say, okay, the prom. Do you remember the prom? Tell me about the prom. All of a sudden, many times you see this awareness pop into their heads and they start laughing. They say, oh, yeah, well, I went to the prom and we did this and we did that. And then they can't tell us what they just had for breakfast 5 minutes ago. A short-term memory. But we can jog in sometimes long-term memories that come out, and we can have a fun time discussing for 10 minutes about the prom. Where did you go? What kind of dress or tuxedo did you wear? Did you have flowers on your wrist or on your dress? Did you go to a party afterwards? Did you stay out all night? We're not going to push the rest of the story, but just the simple thing that they get excited about. Or Disney World. What happened when we went to Disney World for the very first time? Did you remember we went to Disney World? You remember? Yes. Tell me about Disney World. Tell me about the fun we had there. Just jogging a memory, reminiscent. Now, what are we doing? We're engaging together. Okay. There's a whole series of things, and I'm going to run through a bunch of stuff. I have two fabulous manuals. They've been, one was produced in 1999, and the other one was 2006. And they're called Montessori based activities for persons with dementia. And there's volume 1 and volume 2. They're complete lesson plans. Many, many, many things in here with how to alter them, regardless or depending on the size and capability of your individual. If they can't do this, it says try this. If you can't do that, try that. And they're all written out, and it's a beautiful series of manuals. We're going to review some of those. But before we do that, we have to review some ground rules. And I'm going to start today with ground rules. And ground rules are how we present ourselves to a person. And I'll give you an example. We're going to look at nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication. Okay. The first thing we're going to talk about is something called vocalics. Now, this comes from a conference that was presented back, I think, in 1976 at a conference in 1973. It was a paper given at an American Speech and Hearing Association national conference. I believe that was in Detroit. And two guys by the name of Egolf and Chester came up with something called nonverbal communication in speech pathology. And that's my former field, right? And they identified 9 things that are nonverbal communicators. Now, we're not going to talk about 4 of them, but I'm going to tell you what they are. Then we'll get to the other 5, which we can utilize. First of all is organismics. And that is the effects of unalterable physical attributes. Could be color, skin color. You may have somebody, may have a group of people who are white and a black person comes in the room. Well, there is an identification. They can't change that color. And that is a communicator. All right. It's a communicator. Or it could be the opposite. It could be a conference of NAACP and a white person walks into that conference. So skin color is one of the things. Height, tallness. Everybody in the room might be 5'4", and the guy who's 6'7" walks in the door, and almost that's duck. I believe that the height of a door width is 6'8". Now, if they're 6'9", they have to duck to come into a room through a doorway, and the size communicates. Okay, these are communicators. The size communicates. It could be the opposite. It could be extremely tall people in the room and a very short person walks in the room. There's a communication gap there too, a difference, all right? That really doesn't pertain to what we're going to do. The next one is costuming and cosmetics. It's how we dress, the effects of dress on communication. And that communicates very well. Let's say you're a young male. You're 22 years old and you met a woman at work and you said, well, let's go to lunch sometime on a Saturday. Okay. So you go to meet this person at the restaurant or the diner or whatever, and she is dressed to the gills. I mean, she's got this great outfit on, and you come in with a pair of jeans ripped, a t-shirt that's got a couple of holes in it. Who's communicating what? She's communicating by using her costuming cosmetics. That was a very desirable thing to happen. He's communicating like, oh, well, was no big deal at all. So sometimes how we dress says things about us. And when we go to a place, the way we dress makes a difference in terms of how people read us in terms of the desirability or the non-desirability of that event. And, if you're going to someplace you don't really care to go and you're kind of stuck, you're not going to put your best clothes on. Just put something on and get there and get out. If it's something important, you will dress to the occasion. I taught at a university, and my classes were Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I wore a shirt and a tie and a jacket or a suit because I felt it was important for me to look good when I was teaching front of 30 or 100 or 1,500 people, whatever it was. And what I would do is I would go into the room. I would be all dressed, had a nice jacket, nice tie, everything. Well, I'd take the jacket off and put it on the chair just as we were ready to begin. I would loosen my tie, I would roll up my sleeves, and now I was ready to lecture. But I walked in there looking really good because I thought I was supposed to present my best. I was very uncomfortable wearing those kinds of clothes, but yet I did them. Now on Tuesday and Thursday, I was a little more casual. Maybe I had a shirt and a tie without a jacket. But the times that I was teaching, I thought I have to look better. My costuming and cosmetics had to match the importance of what I was trying to deliver. People sometimes dress for an occasion. Maybe a college student has a particular, set of clothes. I remember going to see a friend. The closest I ever got to Harvard was a classmate of mine, and he'd just come out of the Army. And I saw him on a break, and he said, "Well, come on up to Harvard, spend a weekend." I thought, okay, because I knew that academically, I probably wouldn't qualify to attend Harvard. And when up there, I saw guys walking down the campus with scarves around their neck, like a typical college dress code type thing. Then you see this happening when you go to different places, that people wear clothes that are appropriate to the situation. That's costuming and cosmetics. Objectics. And this is the use of objects in communication. All well, let me think of an example here. All vegetables are healthy. Okay, I'm taking every vegetable in the world that's edible and putting it together and say it's healthy. I'm sure there are vegetables that are not healthy. And you have to watch what they are, because sometimes they're not appropriate for you and your body. I discovered some things about me about 10 years ago with iodine. Okay, I'm allergic to iodine. I didn't know that. I can't eat lobster, shrimp, crab, anchovy, because they're all high in iodine, and it will put me into what's called anaphylactic shock. I won't be able to breathe for about an hour, struggling to get breath in. Now, I've got to be careful because I can't have those foods. Those are bad foods. But I might say, all seafood, all shellfish is fine. That's generalization. Everybody thinks this is right, is a generalization. Everybody doesn't like that, is a generalization. And we have to be careful how we generalize information to our audiences. It isn't all or none. It's never all or none. And yet sometimes we create situations through pigeonholing, through putting people in objects, putting groups. I'm Italian, okay? All Italians like pasta. Well, that might not be true at all. Okay, I happen to like pasta, but I happen to like other things too. So we have to be careful not to generalize, and we do this a lot in our society. Every news department is fake. Well, that's not smart at all. You look and analyze what they are and how they are, and then you can come to some kind of a judgment as to whether they are valuable or not. But we use that a lot in our society. And kinesics is another interesting study. And people, have doctor degrees in movement disorders and movement and how people move, or how they will sit and fold their arms. I know I keep hearing this thing about people who lie, or you can tell a person who lies because if they tell a lie, they immediately look down and to the left. So I watch people's eyes when they're telling me something. And if I see that movement, I go, there it is, Now that may or may not be true, but that's one of the things that, you come up with. Or somebody sits there with their arms crossed in front of them. Somebody will say, well, look, they're pulling away. They're not being warm and friendly and fuzzy. Those are dangerous things too, because we can't generalize. Those are nonverbal communicators that we don't deal with. Now, the ones we do deal with, the 5 of them, I call them venting behaviors. So we're going to teach somebody how to vent. Okay. And the first one is vocalics, VOCALICS, which is tone of voice. Now, if you talk to someone who went out on, let's say, went to lunch with someone, they're single, and, they went and had a lunch, and you ask the woman to write out how it went. How was it? And she would write out, fine. Okay. So, oh, this is a good lunch. But if you asked her verbally, how did it go? She said, fine. Well, did the tone of voice indicate it was positive or not? No, it didn't. It never negative. Are you having a good time? Yes. Are you happy? Yes. Well, the tone of voice, 70% of the communication of that comes with tone of voice, not the word that's said. It is said, it's been researched that up to 70% reflects the tone of the voice for the answer rather than the verbalization of the answer. Now, you have to be careful because, you might be advising a mother working with a child. As you said, I have a hard time with my child. And, he struggles with math and I'm trying to teach him math at home. And I say, did you understand that? And he says, yes. And she says, I'll bet you did. Or I'll bet you did. It's all in the tone of the voice. In fact, there's an accent that changes the whole meaning of a sentence. Okay. Let's say I'm going to emphasize one of the words in the sentence and keep moving on. I went to the bank yesterday is a sentence. Now, I went to the bank yesterday. 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 Each emphasis of each word changes the meaning of that sentence. That's the power of the vocalics, the power of communication. I might say to a child, don't touch that. I might yell and scream, don't touch that. Changes the meaning of everything. Now, as we get frustrated working with our loved ones with dementia, we tend to raise our voices a lot. We tend to get that tone of voice that is punitive, which we shouldn't do. We should be very, very careful to keep the tone positive and to keep the tone gentle. We don't want to convey a different meaning than the reinforcement that we're trying to do. Eye contact, that's the E. The eyes are the window of the soul. Now, the eye contact can be reflected in two different ways. Number one, it's a regulatory function. For instance, let's say I was teaching in a class and I saw there was a student I thought pretty much knew the answer to this question. I would ask that question and just look at that student. Wouldn't say a word, just stare at that student. And that student would answer the question. Why? Because by looking at that person, I was basically saying, you are the one to tell me the answer. And they get very nervous and they kind of shift in their chair and stuff. Oh my God, okay, well, I guess I'm supposed to answer the question because I gave them that look, that recognition function. It was your turn to answer. Eye contact can also be a identification function. And I love to do this in the mall. I'm walking down the mall and people are coming my way. And if you look and you see someone and you contact, you immediately establish eye contact about 10 or 15 feet away. If you know that person, you'll continue to look at them, you'll smile and you'll nod or say hi. If you don't know that person, you immediately break that eye contact and continue walking past them as if they weren't there. Sometimes what I'll do is I'm walking down the mall and I see somebody I don't know at all, and I look at them and I nod my head and I smile, and they look at me and smile, and you see this funny look come on their face, like, do I know that guy? Am I supposed to know that guy? And sometimes they'll say hi or they'll say, do I know you? And I will just laugh about it. But it's an identification, and it's amazing how that happens. Look at that when you're in the mall. See how people do with their eye contact. It's amazing. But it's a regulatory function also. Okay. Touch or nearness behaviors. They're called proxemics, but nearness behaviors. You notice if you have a child over in a corner of a room messing around with something and you say, stop, and they don't stop, and you take a few steps closer to them and you say, stop, and they don't stop. Take a few more steps closer and you say, stop, they stop. Is it that you're within the swinging range? No, you're getting closer to identify that thing. In a classroom, for instance, there may be two people sitting in the back of the room who are chatting with each other. Well, if the professor walks slowly down the aisle, the closer they get to those people talking, the less likely they are to talk because they recognize somebody's coming. Oop, we better be quiet. So nearness behaviors can be a good regulation, but it can be a very calming behavior too. If I'm talking to somebody across a room, it's one thing. If I'm sitting next to them in a chair, that's another. The chair thing is much more warm and friendly and comforting than it is talking across the room. Now, how many times do we do that? Is somebody's doing something? My loved one is, touching some things they shouldn't be touching in the living room. And I say, stop, don't do that. And I'm across the room, I'm yelling at them. If I go up to them gently and say, please don't do that, it changes the whole thing. And it makes a much more positive environment for engaging together. Okay. And the last one is, well, there's touch, which is called haptics, touching behaviors. Sometimes holding somebody's hand and talking to them, or putting your arm around their shoulder and talking to them, or sitting next to them, hip to hip, or sitting in front of them in a chair, knee to knee, calms the situation down. And the last one is time control. If you go to somebody's office and you say, do you have time to talk to me? And they look at their watch, say, yeah, okay, go ahead. And they're staring at their watch. What are they telling you? They're telling you you don't have the time. But, well, yeah, are you sure you have time? And they look at their watch again. Oh, yeah, uh-huh. And they keep looking at it. Well, they're telling you they don't have the time. So whether you're pressed for time or not, you act like there is time to communicate. And let me give you a classic example. Let's say you have a daughter who's 16 years old and a boyfriend who's 17 years old, and he has a car. And they're going to go to see a movie. And you say to her, you need to be home by 11 o'clock. Well, 11 o'clock comes by, and 12 o'clock comes by, and 1 o'clock comes by. Finally, 2 o'clock in the morning, she's coming in the front door. What are you going to do? What's your response? You're going to start yelling at her. I told you to be here. You're late. Go to your room. You're grounded forever. Blah, 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 blah. We're not getting at the problem. What you do is you bring her and say, come with me, sit down at the couch, and you sit next to her and you take your hand, her hand in your hand, and say, now, let me ask you some questions. Okay. You're late, yes or no? Now we're going to look at how we communicate in the complexity of communication. The simplest thing you can do is to answer a question where the answer is already embedded in the question. You're late, yes or no? And she says, yes. And I'm going to keep my tone of voice down. I'm going to look at her very calmly. I'm not going to, make a big deal out of this, but, obviously we're going for something here. Now I'm going to go to the next level, which is the referent is present, but the answer is not. Who were you with? And she says, Jim. Okay. The third level of complexity is evoking a prepositional phrase. Where were you with Jim? We were in his car after the movie. Okay. The fourth level is a series of attributes. Tell me some things that happened. So I say, okay, tell me what happened. Well, we got in the car to come home and the car broke down and we took a turn. We were down the wrong road. There were no homes, just trees and stuff. My cell phone didn't work. Okay, well, all right. And the last level is tell me everything. Tell me the story. Okay, just let it out, hon. Tell me what happened. Oh, Daddy, we were so scared. We got out of the car. We looked around. There wasn't anybody. We started walking. We walked a couple of miles. Finally, we found somebody with a house. We saw the light on and we banged on the door. And finally, they came and they called a tow truck and they brought the truck down. And that's why we were so late. Okay, fine. Now, we've solved the problem. We've integrated a communication process here without yelling and screaming. And we've taken them up and down the ladder. Now, how does this relate to a person with dementia? Simple. It relates to how we get them to communicate. Now, I'm going to flash into another situation. I was doing a consultantship in an assisted living community, and they had a secure unit where they had dementia patients. And we were working with them. And there was a guy, and I never forget him. His name was Sam. Sam was about 6'5", 6'6", and he walked around laughing all the time. Hey, Sam, what are you going to do today? Sam, what happened the other day? He didn't talk. He laughed. I thought, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. So I grabbed a couple of aides and I said, let's sit Sam down. I want to try something. And I said, Sam, do you want milk or coffee? Level 1. The answer is embedded in the question. Sam looked me in the eye and said, coffee. Well, the aide said, oh my God, he can talk. Yes, because we went to Sam where he was capable of repeating a word that made meaning to him, but not able to generate it like a level 2. What would you like to drink? Sam wasn't able to do that. But when you gave him the choice, he was able to pick the choice. So we structured his whole day around asking questions with the answers embedded. Do you want soup or sandwich? Do you want to lay down or you want to stay up? You wanted this or that. Give him choices. And they were able to communicate with Sam through this choice system that we set up for him because that's all he was capable of doing. Okay. So that level 1 was very important to him. Sometimes we find that people are not talking because they don't have the ability at this point to generate that conversation. So using that as a simple example, there's so many things we need to be sensitive about before we actually do things. Now, I'm just going to give you a chance to chaw on that for a minute because we're going to do a couple of commercials and we're going to be right back. Okay, here we are back again with the forum and back again with some information about beginning the process of how to taking care of activities at home with your loved one. We've reviewed nonverbal communication. We've reviewed the levels of complexity from answers embedded in the question to complete tell me a story about things to find out where this person is. We've learned to be a little more careful of our eye contact, our tone of voice, our nearness behaviors, our touching behaviors, those kinds of things. These are essential. These are the tools that we're going to start to doing some activities. Now, I came upon these two manuals several years ago. They are fantastic, and they're called Montessori-Based Activities for Persons with Dementia, and it's volume 1 and 2. Montessori-Based Activities for Persons with Dementia. And we're going to talk a little bit about Marie Montessori, who in the early 1900s developed these programs to work with children. And the first thing in the manual, they say, what's wrong with activity programs today? Activity programs developed for persons with dementia are often criticized in two ways. Number one, activities given to persons with dementia are sometimes viewed as childish or busy work. Number two, not enough activities are provided. Family members of residents in long-term care often complain that persons with dementia spend large amounts of time disengaged from their environment, sleeping, staring into space, making repetitive movements or vocalizations, etc. There's a clear need for more effective activity programming in long-term care settings where a majority of residents have dementia. Now, let me mention right now about this word dementia. Many people confuse it saying, well, Alzheimer's is dementia, period. No, it's not, period. Dementia is like an umbrella, okay? And underneath that umbrella, the spokes that hold this umbrella up are the various diseases that contribute to dementia. Alzheimer's contributes about 70% of the weight of that umbrella. There is Parkinson's dementia. There is multiple sclerosis dementia. There is head injury dementia. There's AIDS dementia. There are all kinds of dementias as these damages to the system occur long-term. Dementia many times follows. All right. Another one is Huntington's chorea. Now, people say, well, what's Huntington's chorea? Huntington's chorea is a disease that eventually develops into dementia, and it's very common in the Scandinavian countries and much more prevalent in Wisconsin, Minnesota, those countries where those kind of the states that Scandinavian people tended to come and be with others and friends. It's much more prevalent up there. But again, it's the dementia that we're working with, as well as the Alzheimer's, okay, which is part of this system. And sometimes you see two people with dementia, and you don't know whether they have Alzheimer's disease or whether they have Parkinson's disease or they have multiple sclerosis in late settings, late term disease. The only disease we advocate for that really doesn't develop a dementia is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which is called Lou Gehrig's disease. It attacks the muscles of the body. And at a certain point, the muscles of respiration no longer work, and they can't breathe anymore. We had a person who had a long standing bout of ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and it was Stephen Hawking. And Stephen Hawking developed this disease when he was 23 years old while he was working on his third PhD, and suffered for 40, 50 years with dementia. I mean, with ALS, to the point where he could only move his eyes. And they set up a computer system for him. In fact, I just saw another gentleman who has ALS, and he has the same system that Hawking devised. And he was at the White House, and he gave a speech, which he had designed through his eye contact. He could look at a letter, and that letter would go into a word processor. then look at another letter and put it in next to it, and next to it, and develop a word, then a space, and then another letter and letter. And he wrote this speech by using his eyes. Stephen Hawking wrote textbooks using his eyes. And he gave a very stirring speech about his disease, and he received an award and a very stirring speech about it, but it took him a long, long time to develop it. But at least he had a communication process. That's the only one really that doesn't develop the dementia. Anyway, two major problems are encountered when creating and implementing programming for persons with dementia. Number one, what should be done if an activity is present and they cannot successfully complete the task? And number two, what should be done if an activity is presented and they can complete the required task? Often when people with dementia show the capacity to engage in an activity, they are continually presented with that same activity. In nursing homes, for example, this is seen when residents sit at a table folding washcloths for extended periods of time. When the washcloths have all been folded, the staff may unfold them and ask the resident to start the process over again. I remember there was a woman in a nursing home. I was a rehab director. We had 2 nursing stations, and she would come up and start touching paper on the nurses' stations. They would kind of putting them together and everything. They would say, "Gladys, stop, get out of here, get out of here." Well, finally they found out that Gladys was a supervisor of secretaries. She had 30 people working for her. And she would go around and make sure that everything looked good. And if somebody had a messy desk, she would help clean it or straighten it out. So what they did was they would see Gladys coming in. They would mess up some papers on the desk. And Gladys would come and straighten them up and say, "Thank you, Gladys. Now go down there. I think they need help too." So she would go down the other station. They'd see her come in and mess up a few papers on the desk, and she would straighten them up. So they bounced Gladys back and forth all day long. Gladys was really happy doing this, but there was the same repetitive activity over and over and over again. Under the best of circumstances, when you do repetitive task, this represents meaningless busy work. Still, if a person with dementia cannot do the activity, what should be provided instead of washcloth folding? And if the person with dementia can fold washcloths successfully, how can this be made into a more meaningful activity? Also, there are other activities that could be performed by persons with dementia once they demonstrate the ability to fold washcloths. The purpose of this manual is to provide some guidance in answering these questions. In other words, this manual uses Montessori-based activities, in which we're going to review, as a rehabilitation approach to the treatment of dementia. It is imperative to provide people with AD and related dementias with tasks that enable them to maintain or improve skills necessary or needed in their daily lives. These activities enhance the skills required to perform basic tasks such as self-feeding, preparing simple meals, dressing, and participating in recreational activities. Let's look at some of the concepts right now of the Montessori principles. The mission statement of a good Montessori school closely resembles the mission statements of good long-term care and adult care facilities. In addition, literally hundreds of activities designed to facilitate cognitive, physical, and social skills have already been field tested for over 80 years in Montessori classrooms. Montessori activities are planned in sequences, giving guidance and programming perspective to their use. In addition, general principles of Montessori education guide the development of the activities. Some of these include the following: using real-life materials that are aesthetically pleasing, progress from simple to complex, progress from concrete to abstract, structure materials and procedures so participants will work from left to right and from top to bottom. These patterns parallel eye and head movements associated with reading in Western cultures. Arrange materials in order from largest to smallest, from most to least. Allow learning in progress in a sequence. Ideally, these occur through observation, followed by recognition, and then through recall or demonstration. Break down activities into component parts and practice one component at a time. Ensure that participants have the physical and cognitive ability to manipulate materials and understand what's required to accomplish the task. It's important to minimize the risk of failure and maximize the chance of success. Use as little vocalization as possible when demonstrating activities. Match your speed of movement to the speed of the participants when presenting activities. Almost always use slow and deliberate movements, especially when demonstrating an activity. I love that when somebody says, I don't know how to do something on the computer. Somebody says, well, look, you do this, you do that, you do that. You give me 3 things to do. I'm still thinking about number 1 when they're done. They teach me too quickly. Teach me so I can learn them. Give me the pattern with the speed that I can learn. Make the materials and activities self-correcting. For example, if participants are to match a picture, let's say a butterfly with a category label like insect, you should put a colored dot or red dot on the back of the category label and a dot of the same color on the back of the picture. A different color dot, i.e. green, will go on the back of the pictures for an alternative category, let's say mammal, and its corresponding pictures. Thus, participants could look at the red dot on the back of the insect label and see if the back of the picture of the butterfly had a red dot, indicating it was an insect. Similarly, you could look at a green dot on the back of mammal labels as a means of ensuring that they made the correct sections of category in the picture of a dog. Okay? Have the participants create something that can be used whenever possible. Folding paper can lead to creating figures such as those made in origami classes. Using a melon scoop can lead to making melon balls eaten for snacks. Adapt the environment to the needs of the participant. Now that's, and there's some more that we're going to probably cover later the next time. But the whole idea is to adapt the activity. And one that I'm going to talk about, and probably the last thing for today, is to discuss dice. Okay? You have these fuzzy dice, and they're not hooked up in a string. They're 2 big fuzzy dice. And you have a group of 12 people in an activity. And the families have said, you know, I want my mother in activity. So you put mother in activity, and mother is not capable of doing very much. So mother's probably going to fall asleep during the activity. And the staff would say, well, your mother's in activities all the time, but obviously mommy's taking a nap most of the time. So you see it, you look at the composition of the group, and let's say it would break down into 3 groups. And I've used this example before. Group 1, pretty capable of being participants in this activity. Group 2 has some limitations, but still can participate in a level that's a little below group 1. And group 3 is a group of people who just are not going to participate, but we're going to get them to participate. So with group 1, we give them the 2 dice, or we give them, the 2 dice, and we say, roll the dice. When they roll the dice and the total is a 5, a 3 and a 2. Say, okay, now here's the task. Let's talk about 5 places we can travel on a vacation. And group 1 probably can come up with those kinds of things. We can take a cruise. We can go to the mountains. We can go to Washington and see the monuments and stuff. They're pretty much able to do that. And we can have a great discussion on the places we can go visit. Group 2 probably can't handle the concept of the vacation thing, but we have them roll the dice, and they rolled a 6. Say, let's talk about 6 things we can eat. Now, group 2 is capable of coming up with 6 different foods or things that we can eat. They might not be able to handle a trip, but they certainly can deal with the food. So we're going to have another successful group. Now, group number 3, if you said roll the dice, they're just going to look at you like, what? So you take one dice, a die, and you put it in someone's hand, and with you and they roll the die together. Now it's a 4. So I look at the person, I take their finger, their index finger. I said, let's count the little dots on the die. 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on, count with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Chances are I'm going to get them to count. Chances are they're going to verbalize those 4 numbers. So I'm getting them to participate with the dice. So one simple little die or a couple of dice, 3 different groups, 3 different levels of ability, we can still get responses from them. And we can take many, many of these activities and break them down into that kind of group. Now, the manuals that we have just give us one kind of thing, but then they give us some alternatives. I'll give you one quick example. This is sensory discrimination, okay? This activity. And all right, we're going to use a container filled with material that makes a soft sound when shaken and something that makes a loud sound when shaken. So we're going to put both containers on a tray and put the tray in front of the participant. And you pick up one of them and shake them and say, is this, and say soft. Then you pick one up and says loud. Well, soft might be just some small little objects that are soft that don't make a loud noise. The other container could have like beans or something that makes a loud noise. So I'm relating noise with 2 words of soft and loud. So then I'll shake it and say, what is this? They'll try to, get them to say the soft or say, this is soft. Ready? Listen. Now, what is this? This is soft. You tell me what this is. So I'm going to reinforce that word. I'm going to go through it and we distinguish or discriminate between soft and loud. Now, how can we make the changes? Maybe there are a number of ways we can change. Maybe we can have them shake it and say, listen very carefully. Is that what would you call that noise? Now I'm going to make sure that they can say those 2 words. If they don't say those 2 words, then we're going to design something to have an alternative. They have horizontal and vertical programming. Horizontal play tapes of soft sounds such as a wind, running brook, and loud sounds like thunder, traffic, and have the participants identify each by verbally saying soft or loud. For patients who cannot label, simply present the sounds and say soft and loud. As a matching exercise, to record the sounds of different animals, musical instruments, or environmental sounds. Play these sounds one at a time and have the participants match the sounds with a picture or word label representing the source of the sound. And again, it gives us some problems and some solutions for each of many, 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 many activities in these 2 books. We're going to be continuing to look at these. My whole intent is to start some training programs where we can have a series of seminars where we can say, here's your manual, here's what you need to do at home, here's how you're going to be able to do these activities to engage your patients 10 minutes an hour for the 6 hours of the day. And we have 6 different categories. And I'll quickly tell you what they are. There's physical activities, there are intellectual activities, there are reminiscent activities, there are sensory activities, there are social activities, and spiritual activities. Those 6 things. And we're going to do that every 5 minutes of an hour for the day to engage and engage and engage. So that's beginning of the training. We'll do these intermittently until we can set up the regular training programs. And in the meantime, we may likely have a good guest for next week on the forum.